Hey guys, welcome to Tall Tales with Taco Bell. I'm Mitch Bell, your host. And listen, 35 years ago, I can remember this as a young lieutenant. 35 years ago, the USS Princeton went into a minefield during the first Gulf War. And it was an unknown minefield at the time, especially to them. The ship hit an 800-pound Iraqi mine that just devastating effects. I apologize. I've had a little chest cold here. One of the pilots that I've flown with over the years, Erich Roeder, is just an incredible guy. And what makes it more fascinating to me is he's probably one of the few people that you will meet tonight who has actually survived an attack on a ship, a U.S. naval ship. And they're very few and far between, especially in the modern era. But without further ado, I'd like to bring Erich on and talk about the USS Princeton, buddy. How are you?
Oh.
35 years ago, you survived one of the first attacks that we had during the first Gulf War. As you were in what they call a gator box, or as you're going around. Do me a favor, tell what was that? What were you guys tasked with, and where were you at the time?
Well, we got into the Gulf a couple of weeks prior before things started, before the Air War started, and stayed down south a little bit. We were down with the USS Ranger. Got to go when they started doing the Tomahawk shooting. We got to go up. We shot just a couple Tomahawks. Went back, and then they said, we're going to do this whole amphibious operation up in the north, and we need an AAW and an air warfare commander up there. And at the time, the USS Princeton was the most state-of-the-art Aegis cruiser. It had a brand new Aegis Spy 1B radar, which is, to this day, it's still an incredible radar, and weapon systems. And we were brand new. Literally, we were just out of the box. We were commissioned in 1989, gone through all our trainings, all our workups, and we were ready to go.
Were you a plank owner on the ship at the time?
I'm a plank owner on the ship as well.
No way. All right. So picture, just to show people what this ship looks like. Amazing piece of gear. That's the spy radar that he's talking about, right up on the front, that kind of white patch, right?
Right. Yeah, it's that little patch. There's one on each side of the ship, all four. And there's one on the bridge wing on the starboard side that you can't see, but the energy that's coming out of there, one of the electronic warfare guys told me about it. There you go, that one. And if you stand out on the bridge wing at night, if you remember those old bar flash cubes?
Yeah.
Well, if you threw one of those old bar flash cubes over the side of the ship into the field of the Spy 1B radar, they would all explode simultaneously.
Well, what kind of damage does that do to all you guys?
Well, it was at night. I didn't believe it would happen. And so I stood out. In fact, this was in the Gulf. This was actually after we got up closer to the gator box, and it's at night. And I'm the officer of the deck. I'm out on the bridge wing. And I had this thing, and I went, it's not going to do anything. And I threw it. And as I threw it, I went through the bridge wing door to go back onto the bridge. And the captain had come up to the bridge and was sitting in his chair. And as I threw it, all of a sudden there was a huge flash. And the captain goes, "Oh my God, what was that?" And I'm like, I don't know. I didn't see anything. And he's like, "Oh, okay." But it worked. It's a lot of energy out there that's going out that array phase.
Well, what if you were on the front of the ship? Would you get nuked?
Well, yeah.
Being in front of that radar?
I've heard stories back in the day on the older cruisers and stuff. They had these fire control radars. And I'd heard, I don't know if it's true, but they could actually aim it at like seagulls and stuff, and then like cook a chicken right there.
Nuke them.
Yeah, just nuke. But yeah, radiation exposure is a real deal. In fact, nowadays, I think they limit if they're running the array face if they allow people out on that bridge wing anymore, because this was early 80s. Late 80s. We were careless, and we didn't know. Nobody knew, and so it probably there's a lot of radiation happening just being around antennas and stuff. We always knew that, but some of that stuff they probably improved on a little safer.
Well, I always worry about us as pilots, military. The radar. It
Yeah,
seems like a lot of pilots have girls, because
yeah,
maybe it
yeah. I have
nukes the
two.
male sperm. I've got three, so it makes you wonder if that's not a fact, that we're exposed to a lot of crap from the radar.
Right.
Maybe earlier cancer from our younger days, but
Maybe,
no.
maybe.
Go back then to the 18th, right? Was it the
So,
18th or?
yeah, well, as we're leading up to the 18th, so then they told us to move up to the north. So we start steaming up, and all you Gator guys were, the Marines were up there on their Gators, and we arrive at night, and it was just so surreal to look at the radar scope, and it was just a sea of ships. I'd never seen so many ships on a radar scope.
Right.
And like we're going into that, and everybody had their box, so everybody is steaming around at like 5 knots, and we have our box to go to. So we're steaming up, and all of a sudden I'm looking around, and I'm looking at us, I'm looking around, and I go, Captain, we're the only people with our lights on. We're the target. Maybe we should turn our lights off. And he looked around and went, yeah, you're probably right. So we turned the lights off. So it was really weird. It'd be like being in an airplane, where you're around other planes and you turn your lights off. And
did you guys not get a warning like IMCON? You're doing IMCON running or silent running or something?
Nothing. I mean, it was just we just looked around and went, okay, we might want to turn our lights off. So we turned our lights off, and we proceeded to our box and just navigated. There was moonlight, and with the radar, we went to where we were supposed to go and be on our station. And the most incredible view was in there. Everyone's dark. The moon is out. The moon is full, and you see the USS Missouri go by, and you just go, man, that is an incredible ship. I mean, it was just so beautiful, and just the power, raw power of seeing that thing go by. You're like, that's.
Did they have 2 battleships in the Gulf? I don't remember.
Yeah,
they have the Jersey and the Missouri.
I don't know if Wisconsin was there. I think Wisconsin was there. I'm not sure. That I can't. I know the Missouri because she was part of our battle group. She was based in Long Beach.
Wow, that's cool.
But it was, it was like being in World War II, just seeing that thing go by. And because when I got into the Navy, my crazy story of getting in the Navy, but they said, where do you want to do? And I said, you either put me on the latest and greatest cruiser or put me on a battleship. And I got the cruiser and ended up on a flank owner. So it worked out great. I mean, it was pretty funny. So they went by, we got on our station. So we're hanging out up there. And a couple days goes by, and then they're like, we get a report on the 17th that Falaka Island, which is the island that's right off the coast, there were some silkworm sites that were getting ready to go active. Now, the silkworm missile is, I don't know if you have a picture of that. It's like a flying telephone pole. It's a big missile, old Soviet, easy to shoot down with modern technology.
Right.
And they were going to go active. And so, because they were going to shoot these missiles out onto the amphibious battle group. So our job, they told us, well, we're going to have C-130s come out, and they're going to be dropping daisy cutters on Falaka Island. So I went, okay, cool.
Wow, daisy cutter's pretty big.
Yeah, so we're in our box, and we've been there for a week at this point. So officer to deck is kind of like the representative of the captain when the captain's not on the bridge, and you're responsible for the navigational safety of the ship. And with the tactical action officer, you're responsible for defending the ship. So I'm one of 3 of us, and we're down there under doing our rotation. And they said, we're going to be dropping those bombs. So I said, oh, cool.
Oh, B-52's dropping the bombs.
No, they told us C-130s, but that was the Navy. But but they said it was going to be Air Force C-130s pushing them out the back.
Huh. Okay.
So I don't know. It's 10,000 pounds. It's a large warhead for sure.
Yeah.
And so in that week, you kind of have a box you're supposed to be in, and you're just kind of steaming around the box day and night. And we've been there a week. Now, you don't know where everybody's gone because anybody, the people just went around sometimes just randomly. Mm-hmm. So we're down in the lower corner. You see, you have the box. We're down in the lower corner, and Iraq is on this side. And so we start steaming up the edge of the box. And I said, hey, guys, what we'll go up to the top of the box. Maybe we'll see a flash. Maybe we'll hear something. I mean, this is going to be a big bang. We'll probably hear something. So we start proceeding up the edge of that box. And the captain comes up to the bridge, and he's getting ready to go to bed because it's late. And he goes, I tell him what was going on. Now, of course, he had message traffic, so he knew what was going to be happening. And I said, yes, sir, we're traveling along that we're going to stay in our box. We're going to travel up to north. We're going to go up to this area in the upper west corner. And then we'll come back down. We'll just keep, just make a pattern. And he said, you know what? We actually haven't been to that corner yet. Because when you look at the map, it's not like FlightAware where you see the line and you can see where everybody's gone. It's back in the days of pencils with the quartermasters. I mean, they had to erase stuff and, they would log it, but then you get a clean sheet. Right. So I didn't know anybody had been up there. So he said, we haven't been up there. I want to go up there in the morning. We'll do it in the morning. And he draws a line on the chart and says, don't go any further north tonight than this line. We'll go up there in the morning. I said, Roger that. So we went up to that line. We turned around. We stayed more in the south. They dropped the bombs. We didn't hear nothing. So this goes. So I go to bed. I get off watch, and I go to bed. And it must be. I'm guessing it was like midnight or maybe 4, either midnight or 4. When I went to bed, and the next guy was the one who then started to proceed up the edge. Up to the north. And so I go to bed. And then it's the 18th. So it's the morning of the 18th.
Yeah.
And I wake up out of bed, and every morning the captain gets on it's called the 1MC. It's like, just your announcement system where he has a mic. And we're on the 1MC, and he gives us every morning, hey, good morning, Princeton. This is where we are. This is what we're doing. This is what, just kind of give you the what's happening. And then, so he's, giving us, we're getting ready to go to flight quarters. So we're going to be at foul weather parade. So guys are going to be in the ship. And he says, now I want to let you know that at 5 a.m. this morning, the USS Tripoli hit a contact mine. They got a hole in the side of their ship. They've had flooding. They have managed the flooding. There were no casualties, and they were able to manage the flooding, and they are remaining on station. But it just goes to show you that the threat is real. And
and you blow up at that moment.
At that moment. He's hanging on to the 1MC, and the ship, the fantail goes up 10 feet. This is a 600-foot cruiser. The fantail goes up 10 feet and comes slamming down. And the percussion of the first mine sets off the second mine in the row, which is on our starboard side, and throws us over. So you're up on the bridge, so you're up higher. And so the ship whipsaws and then slams over to the side. The captain's like hanging onto the 1MC as he's being thrown across the bridge. Up there's getting thrown around. And of course he screams, general quarters. So we immediately go to general quarters. And when it happened, so I just had woke up, and I had just gotten out of my rack. And right when it happened, I was standing between my locker and a pillar, and I just immediately braced and felt it go. And just from the the motion and the sound, I was like, okay, this wasn't like an Exocet missile. This what didn't feel like a missile hit.
Mhm.
It's got to be a mine. Now my roommate, who was asleep, he wakes up to being a basketball bouncing between his rack to the rack above him, below him, above him, below him.
Oh, jeez.
And he's, like, what's, he's freaked out. What's going on? And I'm like, okay, we just hit a mine. We just hit a mine. Get out, get up. We're going to the quarters. So he gets up and we throw on our gear. So then I'm like, okay. So I start.
Is the power still on in your?
The power is still on. The power is still on. But so we had the fantail come up, slam down, the ship went over and back, and then everyone starts running for their battle stations. So I start running down the passageway and I start running down the ladder, and I'm like, oh my God, it's smoky. It's smoky. I can't see. I can't see. I can't see. And then I went, oh, you dumb butt, you left your glasses back in your room. So I run back to my room, I grab my glasses, and I start heading down to the repair locker. And as I'm running down there, everybody, is going to their orderly, running very quickly to get to their spaces. And I get down to the repair locker, and we're sitting down there, and I'm talking with the repair locker leader, because I'm kind of like an extra guy down there because I have other responsibilities. And I'm like, man, this is like the way we trained. I mean, if somebody came around the corner, missing a limb or, something really graphic, I mean, that would be jarring. But I said, yeah, exactly how we have trained for the last 6 months. It feels like a drill, but we know it's real. And then we're down there in the locker, and all of a sudden you start getting a guy screaming into the sound-powered phones, which are, man, you're talking about World War II technology that it very basic and it works. And he's screaming in there, and he's letting us know that it's flooding. The compartment is flooding.
Uh-huh.
And Fireman Smith he's in the switchboard room, the number 3 switchboard room, where when you whipsaw the cruiser, the overhead panels are so packed with piping and with cables and things. When it bent, it'd be like taking a Coke can and cracking it. Well, it caused pipes throughout in different parts of the ship and to break. And so chill water lines broke and started flooding that compartment. And so the switchboard was live, meaning it was energized. It's a 400 hertz switchboard. And so it's energized, filling up in a compartment that's filling up with water. But Fireman Smith's job was to be there to reconfigure power in the event of a crisis. And he wouldn't leave his watch. He wouldn't leave the watch. And we're screaming at him, get out. But he can't hear us because the water is rushing in so loud. So the repair locker leader sends somebody in to go get him. And they get him out, and they get the power secured to the switchboard. And then the next thing they have to start fighting the flooding to get the pipes going.
So the flooding is actually not the seawater coming in, but from overhead.
Right. Because, the flooding, Tripoli's hit a contact mine. That was like the kind like on Gilligan's Island, the big ball with pricklies and stuff on it. That is the type of mine that hit the Tripoli. This is the type of mine that we hit. It was on the bottom. I think it was about 60 feet of water. Mm-hmm. And so we got about a 35 foot draft. And there was a string of those on the bottom. And what that does, the way that mine is designed, is to explode under the surface and create a tremendous air bubble that removes the water from the midsection of the ship so that the keel has no more support, and it cracks and breaks, and the ship splits in two.
That's 800 tons of TNT in that thing, right?
And that's the way what it's designed to do. But for us, if everything that day could have gone right, the outcome's going to be the same, you're still going to hit it, but everything was as best it could be, because the time it hit and where it hit and how it hit we got so lucky because when the mine went off underneath the rudders and the propellers and it goes up, imagine like a big bubble bursting out the back. So that energy got dissipated. And then the second one that went off was not under the ship, it was next to the ship, and the force threw us side, heeled us over.
Oh, that's why. Okay.
Yeah. So what ended up with the up and down and heeling over, it caused the superstructure to split open by about 2 feet. So our radio central, that's the fantail, and you can see it like where it's right along there where that crack was. So if you were to bend a Coke can, that's what that looked like. And we had 3 people that got injured that we medevaced off. One of them was in the control room for that gun mount right underneath it. And he wasn't obviously ready for it, and he was right over it. And so he got slammed a couple times into the overhead and was knocked unconscious and had some internal injuries. But he survived. The other 2 were on the fantail, because you think either end of a teeter-totter, it's going to get the worst of it. And so there were 2 guys that were on the on the bow, on the forecastle, and one of them was in a mine lookout chair. He went up into the lookout chair and cut his head on the awning. And then the guy that probably got hurt the worst was on the 50 cal, because just for defense. So that was his job to be up there. And when he didn't have anything to hold on to, so he didn't have an overhead to stop him, and he didn't have an awning to stop him. So he went up. I probably went 10 feet up in the air, came down, landed on his head, split his knee, broke his knee, and he's bleeding out on the forecastle. And the signalman up on the bridge, one of the signalmen, who was one of our rescue swimmers, looked down and saw him down there, and immediately left the bridge, because he was one of the extra guys up there. And he immediately left the bridge and went down the side, because there are ways to go, up and down the ship, either inside or outside the ship. So he went outside the ship much faster, got down there, started giving him first aid, and then got him to the corpsman. And then they got him, started taking care of him. So they were able to stop the bleeding and get him immobilized and stuff. So
that's amazing. Only 3 serious injuries and no deaths.
Well, and and that comes to play for the luck we had in the time of day, because at that time, before 8 o'clock, the majority of the people were amidships, because it was either most of the berthings were more kind of midships. There's some that are there's one a little bit further forward, but the majority of the folks were on the mess decks eating. So they were in the center of the ship, just like where my stateroom was. I was just, I was aft of the mess decks. So it wasn't it was a manageable ride that I could hold on to. I could hold on. But the guys that were on either ends got the worst of it. So the time of day kept.
What about the engineering department? Those guys
right.
down
Those guys, the engineering unit or engineering compartments are generally more centralized, where you have the main engine rooms and the auxiliary rooms and stuff. Most of them are more to the center.
I didn't know that.
And, you've got the anchor windlass and all that's up front, and then in the back you've got the sonar gear and the after steering and stuff. So those are the extremes. So nobody's in those compartments typically, unless you're going on in and out of port or something like that, or hunting submarines. But so the time of day was absolutely critical in that it kept everybody central, and people had stuff that they could hold on to, and they could manage. And on top of that, with the helicopter that was getting ready to do a morning flight, I don't know if they're getting a mail run or they're doing something. At 8 o'clock, we would have had a helicopter with turning blades on the flight deck. And you got ground crew running around those guys. Yeah. And if it would have hit at that point when that helicopter was still on deck with blades turning, it's far enough aft, there would have been people thrown up and could have
launched them right up into the
and gone up into, I mean, it could have gotten very ugly. Also, on top of that, when you're at your foul weather parade, because the helicopter's out, so people normally you do your morning meetings, you're standing outside and you're enjoying some fresh air for a little bit. But with the helicopter out, everybody's inside. Well, if it had been at 8 o'clock, there would have been a lot of people in the aft part of the ship. You would have had all the gunner's mates in the aft gun mount, where the guy was hurt. You would have had sonar techs that were way in the back in the Nixie room, and you would have had the engineers, the HTs and MRs and stuff, and DC men would be back in their repair shops, so they would have been back aft. So there would have been a lot of people in the fantail when it hit, which they would have gone into the overheads and stuff, or into each other, and would have gotten hurt. So I mean, if it's going to happen, there could not have been a better time for it to happen. But even better, when it did happen, I mean, we were ready.
So Captain Hontz' decision to wait until it was going to be sunlight probably played a big effect on that.
All right, and the time, yeah, exactly, and that because I was one of 3 officers of the deck. I'm a proud Texas A&M graduate, but I also knew, as one of 3, I had a 33.3% chance of something happening on my watch. And I knew, as an Aggie, I'd never hear the end of it. I didn't want it to happen on my watch. And fortunately or unfortunately for Jerry, who's an Academy graduate, he was the officer of the deck when they hit it. So it was an Academy guy on the bridge, not an Aggie.
little.
Yeah. But it was, so I mean, that really worked out, because if it would have happened, it would have happened on my watch, because we would have gone up there at night. And depending on, because I've heard different things from different people, they may have laid the mines that night, or they were already there. There is a little bit of dispute from some people I've talked to, but they would have already been up there more than likely, and we would have hit it on my watch, which I kept a diary, and in the diary, I thought for sure at some point we were going to hit a mine, a contact one, because at night you can't, this is first generation night vision. It's not like it is today. And you're kind of looking out on the ocean. You just can't see. And so I always figured it, during the day we had found 3 of them, I think 3 of them. But at night you can't see them.
Would you guys blow those up?
If we found them, they would fly EOD out, and EOD would then attach explosives to it, go back, and then blow it up. So I have some videos that I took that we posted on our YouTube page, where in the video they talk about, or it shows them blowing up a mine. In fact, there's a funny video. One of the videos with the Desert Storm. It's the night before the day before we hit the mine, and I'm on the bridge with the captain, talking to the captain, and they just blown up a mine, and I think it was pizza night. So we were all excited because it was pizza night, which for the Navy, that's a big deal. and little did we know it was going to get even more exciting.
Now, what was the temperature like out there? It's the Gulf. It's January or February. Is it 70s, 80s?
Yeah,
how was the temperature?
The temperature wasn't bad. It was very comfortable. And the water temperatures were fine. So it wasn't like, you're in the North Atlantic and you're taking on, freezing cold water and stuff. I mean, so in that respect, it was pleasant. In fact, at one point when we were further south, before we got into the Gulf area, the captain said, all right, because there's an official Navy uniform, which is khaki shorts. Mm. And he said, if y'all want to wear your khaki shorts, because it was hot, he goes, if you want to wear shorts, you can, but you need to follow the regulations. So I went, okay, I'll do it. So I was in the Philippines. I picked up the shorts, but you had to wear your black Docker shoes and black socks. Now, to the guys, I was just JG. Well, to the lieutenants, that was just not cool. So they were like, "We're not wearing those. We want to wear topsiders. We don't want to wear. It would look stupid." But I'm like, "Man, I'm hot. I'm going to do it anyway." So I was the only officer that did it. And there's a picture out there of me on the bridge in my regalia, because that no one else was brave enough to do it. But it was cool. It definitely felt cooler in that wardrobe. But in the Gulf, we were in combat zones, so that was not authorized.
All right, so boom, you get blown up.
Right.
You're down there. That poor guy is about to get electrocuted.
Yep.
I'm having visions of the engineer trying to keep the power going on the Titanic, flipping the switches and the breakers are blowing.
Yep.
Now what? Now you have to shut that
So
down, which shuts down the power
right.
to
So
the
they
ship.
have to shut down the number 3 switchboard. They have to reconfigure power, and then they're stuff just like on an aircraft. Some stuff's going to start getting shed. And the engineer is in the engineering central, which is in the center part of the ship, and they are they're trying to assess all the damage because they're getting all these reports of flooding because different compartments, you had sprinklers in different systems where started flooding compartments. At one point they had this one compartment that was flooding, and they back toward the aft section of the ship, and they thought there was a breach in the hull, and it turned out there was a top. They have these inspection covers that are on these tanks so they can go in and do inspections and things. Mm-hmm. And one of them had blown off, and it was some of the stuff out of there coming out of the tank. And so that was where the flooding was coming from. So they're having to assess all this stuff. The damage control assistant, has a giant board. He's mapping everything out of where all the damage is. They're sending out people to do inspections because there are a lot of spaces that don't have people in them. So you have to send out investigators to go out and investigate. So those guys are just going out into the unknown, going into compartments, not really sure what they're going to find when they open stuff up, so they can report back, yeah, we've got flooding here, or it's all good. And so they're marking all that stuff out. So this is going down, and I'm back in repair 3, and then they call and say, hey, you need to go down to after steering because we don't have steering from the bridge. We're basically just floating in the minefield. We have no control. And I was like, okay. So I take off and I run down to after steering, which is just down around the corner from the repair 3. So I go down into the space, and as I open the hatch and start climbing down in there, hydraulic fluid is everywhere. It's oozing. I mean, because we have powered little switchboards and controllers and stuff that are on the wall, and it's all just seeping everywhere. And I'm like, okay, this is not good. And so I start securing stuff, getting ready to take control down there, to take control of the bridge, or take control of the rudders. And they call away my team because I was the auxiliaries officer. So the after steering was my responsibility. So that my team comes down and we start assessing the situation. Mm-hmm. So we're like, okay, we're looking around. We've got the port rudder is at like 30, 35 degrees turned, and the starboard rudder is straight. So it's kind of like this configuration. Well,
sure.
This rudder's got to get straight, and we got to get control of the other rudder. So we start with the one that's straight. So we get down there, and you go through your QRH. You're going through your checklist, and it says, okay, first try to take electrical control. Well, that wasn't going to work because that stuff was all soaked in hydraulic fluids and need to be rebuilt. So then the next thing is, kind of like when you're flying the Bonanza, you want to lower that landing gear. You got that crank, and you got to start pumping. Okay, well, they have, instead of pumping physically, you're pumping like this. And so we go down there, Benjamin and I, we start reconfiguring the hydraulic system, and we get set up, and we get positive control of the rudder. So we turn it, we verify that we can go left, we can go right. But kind of like lowering landing gear on a plane, when you're pumping it down, it takes a lot of pumps to get it to move. So on like a T-34, it's like 34, 37, it's a lot of pumps. So we did as little as we could. We verified we had control, but we knew we were going to need a team of people if we were really going to be doing big rudder swing. So I called to engineering and I say, we've got control of the starboard rudder, and it's going to be manual.
But the other one's still cocked. So
you're cocked. I said, we've got one right now, and the engineer, head engineer, they're not the chain, but you have his person who's working for him, kind of like the officer at the deck of engineering. And he says, great. Now I want you to go left 30, right 30, back amidships, so we can time it, so we know our performance. And I remember just staring at the phone, and I let out a few expletives going, what are you saying? Do you realize how many people we would need down here to do that? I go, it's going to take a long time. It's a long time.
Uh-huh.
And then I guess he realized, oh yeah, because he's an engineer, and then he realized, oh yeah, that kind of stupid. That's probably not. That's probably not. That doesn't make any sense. So he rescinded that request, and so then we were getting ready to start on the port rudder.
Yeah.
Now again, while we're back here and we're standing on the bottom of the ship in the fantail right above the rudders, the other teams are fighting the flooding in the compartments forward of us, and then there was actually up on near the flight deck was flooding because there were chill water pipes up in that overhead that broke, and so there was chill water piping that needed to be repaired.
Weren't there shutoff valves that you guys could?
There are.
Those?
They can start shutting stuff off, and they're working to trace stuff out. It's not quite, depending on where it happens, it's sometimes not as easy to figure out where the water's coming from, which pipe is it coming from. So it takes some time, and they can, fight the flooding. Now that upper area was the responsibility of the helideck, so the aviators. And, aviators, they come on ships. They're like, man, just show me the chow hall and where the booby is, and that's all I care about. I don't do any ship stuff. But that was, and we can talk later about that. That was one of the things Captain Hontz did. He said, no, you aviators, you're going to go through damage control training. You're going to know, because you need to know what you're doing. Every person that came to that ship had to do their damage control. And it was a red book. I got one right up here. It's a red book, and you got to go through it. And so they did. And so they did a great job fighting the flooding, and they stopped it. They did it. They, guys that didn't think they were ever going to be a part of anything other than flying their helicopter, they were there, and they stood up and went to town. So these guys are all doing their stuff. Now, while all this is going on, like right after we hit the mine, we were the anti-air warfare commander. Well, all of a sudden, we start having all kind of problems. They were screaming across the net that we just hit a mine through all the different secure nets and stuff. And so we had to immediately, there are procedures in place that you go to your alternate, whoever the alternate commander is. They will now become the commander. It'd be the same thing like you're in a bomber formation and the lead gets knocked out, somebody else jumps up. So we immediately transfer over. They start reconfiguring the power, rechecking the systems, figuring out what systems are working. And man, I'm trying to remember, I think it's like 15 minutes. We took the air warfare commander back because we had a forward launcher that still worked. We had a forward gun that still worked.
Oh, wow.
And so, and the forward deck houses worked, and they took AAC back. I mean, which was just incredible. I mean, the tactical action officer, just did an incredible job. And oh, by the way, who was the tactical action officer that day? None other than Mike Gilday, who was chief of naval operations, not just recently.
Really? CNO?
He ended up being the CNO.
Wow.
And they did a great job. But they're working all that. They're working all the combat systems while all the engineers and all the repair teams and locker leaders and investigators are all running out around the ship, taking care of stuff. I mean, everybody is working simultaneously. And so I'm back in after steering, and then all of a sudden they call and said, evacuate. And I'm like, what? And they said, they're evacuating. We've got to get out. So I'm like, okay. So we start, and it's a very small compartment. So we start funneling out, and we go up, we have to go up a series of ladders. And I think at the time, because we were just getting ready to start on the port rudder, I was over on the port side. And so then they called evacuate, and the ladder's on the port side, and you can't really get past people very well. So I go up to the flight deck, and and everybody starts following behind me, and we're coming out. So we get out onto the flight deck and we evacuate. And that's a good feeling, to not be standing on the bottom of a ship in a minefield. I mean, it's like, I think I like it up here better.
Yeah.
And so we're talking like, hey, we're talking about, they're saying, oh yeah, there's a crack here. The the radio control room is opened up, and talking about all the damage people had seen. And then across the announcement system, like the one that the captain was on giving us our morning brief, I hear Lieutenant J.G. Rader 1001, which is the phone system of the ship, and that goes to the captain's chair. So I went, "Ooh, that's interesting. I don't know what did I do now? What did I do now?" And so I call up there, and he says, "Hey, you guys got to get back down there. They screwed up. You guys aren't supposed to evacuate because we can't steer the ship. You guys got to fix the ship. You got to fix the rudders." So I went, "Okay, I guess we're going back now." So I grabbed the guys up there. We put the word out, and they said, after steering team report. So we start running down there, and we get down in the space. And what I didn't know was one of the firemen, or one of the EMs was left. He was on the phone, and as we were evacuating, they said, "You don't leave." And so he had to stay down there by himself. Now, I feel horrible that I didn't know that he was there.
Yeah,
and that because when you get up to the where everybody was up on the helo deck and all that. I mean, there were a lot of people. Everybody was evacuated, so there were a lot of people. And I thought I counted everybody, but I missed them. And I come this vertical ladder. I come into the space and I see him there, and he's like, "Man, I'm so glad to see you guys." And I'm like, "What?" And they said, "Yeah, they told I had to stay. They wanted to keep me on the phone, so just to report what's going on." And I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." We're like, "Wow." So we turn around, everyone's standing there, and everybody is very nervous because you had that moment, you're out of the danger, and then all of a sudden now you're standing on the ship. And I said, "Okay, guys, take two. Let's figure this out. Where we are standing, if anything happens, we will never know. It will be instantaneous. If a mine goes off under us again, we will never know. So don't worry about it.
Yeah.
We have a problem. The problem is the port rudder is we need to straighten it. So let's get our emergency equipment. Let's knock it out, because the sooner we do this, the sooner we get out. We get up topside." So I grabbed the QR, the equivalent of a QRH, our little emergency procedures. Mm-hmm. And I'd only been the auxiliaries officer for about a year. And we're going through the procedure. So the first thing, okay, take care of it locally. Can't do it. Then do the hand pumps. Okay, fine. We'll do the hand pumps on both rudders. Well, we go to do the hand pumps and they don't work. And you're like, okay, now what? Well, you go to the next line. If that doesn't work, then go to this. And on the rudder post is a threaded rod with a ratchet assembly. And you start ratcheting, and it moves like a big nut that I don't know how much a rudder weighs, but it's a lot of weight. I mean, it's thousands and thousands of pounds, and it will push the rudder back into position, and then you lock it into place. So then you have one rudder that's locked into place, and you'll have one rudder that you can move, and you can move around like that.
And how can you tell what direction the rudder is from where you're standing? Is there a dial, or
there's like the rudder post is a giant post, and it has markings on it, so you can see that it's stuck. So we realized that the hydraulic system to the rudders is out, and so we go to the ratchet. We said, okay, next procedure, go to the ratchet. So my engineman and starts ratcheting, and gets to where it starts putting pressure on the actual rudder, and then the threaded bar starts spinning, which means the threaded bar had been sheared. And so it doesn't work. And we looked at that, and then just like in the airlines, it says into procedure.
Oh. This is where your chief or somebody had seen something.
This is right as I was a new auxiliaries officer, the senior chief, super, salty, as we would say in the Navy, super experienced and retiring. When he was teaching me down there and after steering, we went through all the procedures, and then he said, "Well, back in the day, we used, if that didn't work, we used a come along to get the rudder straight. And so I don't know why I remembered it. Just, I mean, this was a conversation a year and a half ago. I just all of a sudden remember it. And, and I go, come along. And I said, somebody, one of the enlisted guys, run up, go to the repair locker and bring me back a come along. Cause they have them on the ship. And a come along is one of those chains and ratchets. So if you're lifting your motor out of your 57 Chevy or whatever. So they bring me one. So now I'm looking at this thing and I don't have a freaking clue what to do with it. And I'm looking at the rudder post, and I'm looking at the rudder, and I'm looking at the way the mechanisms are. And I'm like, and I was an engineer. I was an aerospace engineer. And I'm looking at it as an engineer would. And I'm like, I don't know what angle I need to be putting force at that would actually do anything. And I just guessed. And I said, run it through here, this one area, run it back to me, and I'll attach it over here, and then I'll start cranking. So I start cranking. And it's starting to get really tight. And nothing's happening. And it's getting tighter and tighter and tighter. And my biggest worry then was, we're in a very small compartment. And if that chain breaks, it's going to take us out. It's going to be, there's some people that are going to get really hurt. And then my engineman, Petty Officer Moose, ends up trying the ratchet again as it's under all that tension. And he moves the ratchet and it goes click, click, click. And the rudder moves. And he got about 2 or 3 clicks, and then it started spinning again. And then I went on to my come along and tightened, and then he went click, 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 and then I tightened, and he went click, 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 and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and we walked it back to center, and we're able to lock it into place. So then we got the port rudder locked into place. We got the starboard rudder with manual control, and while we were doing this, simultaneously, you had the electrician's chief down there. Johnson was down there, and they were putting the electrical components, they were rebuilding them and got them up. So then we got electrical control of the starboard rudder, and then we passed it to the bridge. So then the bridge had steering control with one rudder, the other rudder was locked amidship, and we were told we could leave, and then we got out.
Now, does somebody normally have to stay down in that section, or is that unmanned?
You're normally down in that section during when you're going in and out of port. Or say you're going through the Straits of Hormuz, you're going through the Straits of Malacca or something like that. If you're kind of in a restricted maneuvering kind of thing, because you need to be able to take over the rudders very quickly. And the bridge will say, come left 5 degrees, right full, they'll give you rudder commands, and then you just match it.
Oh, okay.
So we got it. So we were able to get out of there. So we get out of there. So we all go back up to the flight deck. So we're standing on the flight deck. Now everyone's, we're assessing what's going on. And Captain Hontz comes down to the flight deck. And he's looking around and talking to people and kind of trying to see the battle damage, because he was up on the bridge and he's been trying to assess what is the state of his ship. And he realizes that he needs to know what is going on underneath the ship. So he turns to me and says, "Hey, you're a scuba diver, right? You got scuba gear? We need to get somebody over the side to do an underwater survey." And I had all my gear, but I didn't have tanks, because when we passed through Hawaii, I was gonna buy tanks, and then I go, why do I need tanks? Anywhere I go scuba diving, I can rent them, and then I don't have to keep them in my stateroom, and they'll take up space, because if you've on a ship, space is very limited.
Right.
I didn't have them. And I can tell you now, without a doubt, little 24-year-old me, there is no doubt in my mind I would have suited up and gone over the side. It freaks me out now to think how crazy that would have been. But I would have done it. And the sea snakes and being in a minefield, and if anything went off, you'd be underwater. That would be it. And and doing a survey underwater trying to stay away if there are any, I don't know where all the suctions are coming up. It would have been, I would have done it because he needed to know what if there were any breaches or anything in any of the external tanks. So unfortunately or fortunately, I didn't have tanks and nobody had tanks. So we had to wait until the divers arrived that got flown in and dropped in the water. And then they did the underwater survey about an hour.
Okay, so let's go back to this. You're in a minefield, unknown minefield.
Yeah.
Where do you kind of backtrack the way you came in?
Well,
how do you get out of a minefield?
So we're sitting there wondering, what do we do? Well, so we're floating, and they call in the minesweepers that are in the area because they're part of the amphibious battle group. The minesweepers come in, and they start looking around and determine a path. And then there's a salvage ship that comes alongside and starts towing us out. So you have minesweepers looking at mines, and then you've got the salvage ship that starts pulling us away from the.
Well, where was the damn minesweeper when you guys went in there?
Well, see, this is where it gets interesting because we didn't know there were mines because there is no way, no how we would have gone up into that area if we had known there was a mine. There was a minefield there. But maybe the British might have known that something was going on in that area.
Yeah.
And they had pulled the helo guys, the Navy helo guys, the MCMs, the CH-53s that pull the minesweeper sleds. Mm-hmm. They had swept in that area. And I know that because when I was in the reserves, a guy met me, realized I was on Princeton, and the first thing he said was, I promise you I swept that area before y'all were there. I promise. and so I wondered, I've heard, the Brits knew and stuff. And then this is a year ago. I'm at Texas A&M. I'm at my daughter's annual, she's in the Corps of Cadets. It's like the annual unit dinner. And I sit down at the dinner and I'm sitting next to the dad of the CO. And the dad of the CO was British. And we got to talking. And he was like an EOD. He was an EOD guy for the Brits. Then he finds out that I was on Princeton. And he goes, I cleared that minefield by hand after you guys left. And I was like, what? And so he knew everything about the Princeton and that area and everything. And then he had literally, and he true said, man, I look back, that was the craziest thing. In 0-0 visibility water, I'm moving my hands through muck to find those Manta mines on the bottom. But they got them out. And then I said, well, did you guys know that the minefield was there? He said, yes. We kept telling people, what are they doing up there? There's a minefield. And I go, but they said they pulled the sleds. They pulled the sleds through there. And he goes, we saw them pulling the sleds. Those sleds were worthless. They don't detect stuff very well. We knew they weren't going to find anything. And I went, can you imagine? I mean, this is 34 years later. I happen to be sitting next to a guy who's British. His son, American passports, but and he was there and he knew the whole story. It was absolutely hilarious.
It didn't it tell the story about the Brits flying their helicopters and buzzing you?
Oh, well, yeah. They had these Lynx helicopters. They would come out and they would be doing observations and doing different things. So they would come to our ship to refuel. And they'd come in, and pilots being pilots, when they left, they would lift off the deck, and then they would kind of slide off to the side, and then they would accelerate at very high speed, and then pass right by the bridge wing, and go straight up, and just basically just like a flyby right in front of the bridge. And I'm sitting there, and I, of course, the pilot in me at that time, I was just a general aviation pilot, but the pilot in me at that time was like, man, that's freaking cool.
Yeah.
And then you kind of at the airlines, you got to put your captain hat on and go, yeah, but is it safe? Is that what you do? And I said, I probably should say something to the captain just to let them know that, that's probably not a safe thing to do. Because, man, they could, if they misjudge, their propeller blade could hit something that you could be killed.
No, you were thinking, not on my watch, man.
Not on
my
watch,
watch,
baby. Not on my watch. And so I called the captain and I said, Captain, I just want to let you know this is what was going on. It's I think it's unsafe. I just want to make sure that you're aware this is going on. I don't know, if you can do anything, if you want to or need to do anything about it, but I just wanted you to know. And he just laughed and said, "Oh, those Brit pilots will be Brit pilots. Just don't worry about it." And I'm like, okay.
Nice.
So yeah, I mean, it was fun. I mean, but they're pilots. They're just crazy. I mean, even our pilots were funny, and they did crazy stuff.
Well, I want to go back to the ship. Take you back there for a second. At this point, you've only had a couple hours sleep because you had the mid watch.
Yeah.
The adrenaline is going in all of you. When did you come off the high from the adrenaline rush?
It really was in the late afternoon, because at that point, once we got under tow, there are pictures that we have that are sunset photos, and those sunset photos that I took were at that time where everybody was just kind of having a reflection point, just looking out onto the water and kind of taken aback by what what had happened during the day and how fortunate we were. We got the 3 people flown off that got looked at, and everybody else on the ship, just took a breather at that point. And the supply people, that worked the mess decks and got out the sandwiches and got us food. I mean, and took care of us. I mean, it was, again, everybody knew their job. Everybody worked together. It was the most incredible event that happened that, we were so prepared for. Yeah, that's it. That's the sunset. That's our sunset. And people are just kind of standing out there looking around, just going, what a day.
Yeah,
at this point, we're under tow, and we're starting to get towed down initially to Bahrain, but and then ultimately to Dubai. But before we get there, before nightfall, they're looking at the fantail, that picture you have that shows the back of the ship that looks all cranked up. They realized that 85% of the structure, well, they calculated later. They knew it was really bad, and they calculated later 85% of the structural integrity of the fantail was breached. So we about lost the fantail. It held on. But you see those cracks as they started to tow us, the fantail was wiggling.
Oh.
And okay, that's going to, again, like a Coke can, you start moving it back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, you're going to break it off.
Yeah.
So the HTs got a great idea of getting
which HTs,
and they start welding steel girders along the side at temporary. And then when we got to Bahrain, they welded even more to try to give some more structural integrity back there. Which, yeah, again, people are, having to think out of the box on a lot of this stuff. And that, that was just an incredible thing, the idea that they came up with.
Is that line going across?
No. That was initially a strap they put around just in case we broke apart. We wouldn't lose it. I think that was like a big line.
Oh,
like a mooring line, that you would tie up to a pier.
Yeah.
And because this picture was taken by a helicopter that was flown out to take a look at us when they got the damage. So at this point, we're in the middle of fighting the flooding and taking care of the people that are hurt and all that.
So it looked like it kind of broke it up, but not all the way down. So did the cracks go all the way through to the bottom?
As you crinkled the can, it went all the way. It went around.
Yeah.
And it went down. It did. It didn't go under. I don't remember from the bottom, because when we got to Dubai is when they cut out all those damaged sections. So when we got into Dubai, that's a super tanker dry dock, and we look like a little toy at the end of that thing.
Yeah.
And They went through the 3 sections of the ship, which were crinkled, and literally cut the skin and replaced all the skin, all the girders, all the piping, and put Humpty Dumpty back together again, which was pretty impressive.
Yeah.
But what kind of sucked was you're like, man, I'm in Dubai. I'd love to be in a hotel. And they went, we're in the middle of a war. We're not putting a bunch of Americans out in a hotel. You're staying on the ship. So we had to live on the ship in the dry dock in the middle. I didn't have power in my stateroom for like a month because
no AC. Did you have AC?
Power for my stateroom came out of the number 3 switchboard. So I didn't have, so we had, you had flashlights and stuff as you're looking around trying to get dressed or take a shower, or, it was, you dealt with it. And they hooked up external fans because the air conditioning system didn't work. And they, it's kind of like World War II with fans blowing down and stuff. And
yeah,
they made it as comfortable as they could. And then eventually we started getting power back, and then we got back together, and they put us back together.
Jeez, that is an amazing deal. And the ship is still out there today.
The ship is out there today. They're thinking maybe 2027, 2028, retire it. We'll see. So we do, we started initially after the event, we did the officers got together, and some enlisted would get together periodically. And then they said, let's do the whole crew, because it'd been a couple decades, and so it was like, hey, Captain Hontz was like, this is kind of like after World War II or Vietnam. We're kind of at that time since the event where people kind of processed it and are ready to get together again. So that was me, Lieutenant JG, auxiliaries officer, and that is the A gang. And let's see, I don't know where Muse is. Muse was one of the guys in my group who, he was a weightlifter, and he was, I guess whenever we took that picture, he might have been on watch or something, because he was not in the picture, but he was a weightlifter. And man, I mean, at that point, man, I needed every bit of strength I could, and I had the right man and the right job at the right time. And he did a great job.
I love this picture.
Yeah, I don't grow spirits well. Yeah, that's actually the locker I was holding on to. That was the locker I was holding on to between the locker and the stanchion. But yeah, Navy guys, they'd have beard growing contests at sea, and I failed miserably.
Yeah, dude, that's impressive right there.
Now that was when we were coming back. I think we were coming back, or it might have been during an exercise off Hawaii. I can't remember exactly when it was. All I know is I was in after steering. So again, when you're restricted in maneuvering, you have people down there, and I was one of 2. There were only 2 of us that had our sign off. So I'm down there, and I go down first.
Yeah. And
I told the other guy, I said, Lester, you watch the first volley, and then you swap out with me, and I'll come out and watch the second. And he was like, yep, not a problem. I'll do it. I'm like, great. So he gets up there and watches the first volley.
And
I hear the boom, the ship kind of shakes, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. I can't wait to see. And I'm waiting for him to wait. He never shows. And then I hear kaboom, and that's the full broadside. And I was so mad because that was it. And they were done. And so we finish up, we get out of formation, they secure and I go and I find one of my roommates, and I find Lester. I'm like, gave him a few choice words, and I'm like, you were supposed to come down so we could both see it. And he was like, dude, it was awesome. I couldn't move. It was so awesome. And
you know what? Did you give him the Blue Falcon Award?
It's the shake of the ship.
Yeah, did you give him the Blue Falcon Award, buddy fucker?
Yeah, that was.
Buddy's only half a word.
That's really, and not only that, he was one of my roommates, but he was just completely mesmerized by the broadside, and I just can imagine how impressive that was to see.
Well, what kind of training did you guys do? You said 6 months prior, the captain really
Yeah,
got into the training. I remember as a kid in Norfolk going Boy Scouts, and we went to this place in Norfolk, and the new recruits would go in there, and the explosion in the water, and they were sticking big things of wood in there to
yeah,
brace the ocean, and
yeah.
it was the sea repair, damage control repair ship. It was like
They damage control pit. They have a course called Buttercup where they call it, people call it Buttercup. I don't, but it was where you went. I did it as a midshipman when I was in ROTC at A&M. On the summers, we'd go out and do midshipman cruises, and you go into a simulated ship
yeah.
that then all of a sudden there's the hole in the wall just starts gushing like you had hit a contact mine or collided with a ship or was hit with a round, and you have to fight the flooding, and that's where you put up the wood, and if you're fighting, you have different techniques that you use depending on the type of the flooding you have. Pipes, you have little covers that you mount on, and rubber and gasket, and then if it's you might have to use some shoring to shore stuff up. You might have to put mattresses against the hole and try to keep packing it and tighten it. You go through all this training, and that was part of the training. In fact, let me look up here. Hold on, give me 1 second. I'll even show you. All right, I'm frozen. There we go. So everybody had to have this book, and this was the damage control book that goes through all of the repairs and different things, and what you are supposed to do. And every person that came aboard the ship and was going to be part of ship's crew, whether they were the aviators, they were we had people who come on board, civilians that come on board to teach classes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, those guys are incredible to go into a war zone to teach class. And so they were handed this book, and they said, you got to know it. And so they learned how to, because they had to be part of the crew. And we, that was the first step in making sure we read it and get all our PQS, our personal qualification standards, all signed off. And then we started running drills. Now, at the time, I didn't realize that Captain Hontz was friends with Captain Wren, and Captain Wren was captain of the Samuel B. Roberts and was a frigate during the escort days and the tanker war stuff, where they got into a minefield and they had to back out. And in the process of backing out, they accidentally detonated a mine, which then their fantail got damaged. They didn't sink, and nobody got killed or anything, but did damage. So there was a lot of knowledge transfer between them of, here's what I learned being on Samuel B. Roberts. And then Captain Hontz took that. And then the Navy realized after Samuel B. Roberts that they were like, we kind of need to know what happens with ships in mines, because it's kind of World War II-ish. You don't think about it.
Yeah.
So they took the Mobile Bay and they detonated a mine next to it, just off of it, to see what would happen.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, they weren't trying to sink the ship, but they wanted it to get a blast to see how the equipment held up.
Mm-hmm.
It had the blast, and it just devastated electronics and stuff. And so the engineers went back to work, and then they came up with fixes. And they realized that you don't want motors and things hard mounted to the hull, because if there's an explosion, there needs to be flex points, shock mounts, or equipment's going to get damaged.
Right.
They
Makes sense.
figured out all of these mounts, and they worked. I mean, then I think they did another. I think they did two. but anyway, they developed all these mounts and they worked, and those were all the ones that we had. We had all the, because we were brand new.
Yeah.
Now the XO of Princeton was on Mobile Bay, and so he had been through the mine trials, so he knew how that went down and what their lessons learned. So again, that fed Captain Hontz as well.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, he would. I can't remember how many mines they did, but I know they did. I've seen the picture of the one they did that was live. I mean, it's like pretty incredible.
Yeah.
And they learned a lot from that. So Captain Hontz took that information in and said, okay, this is what we're going to do. Everyone's going to know damage control, and we're going to train, and we're going to be ready for anything, anytime, anywhere. And we trained, and we trained, and we trained. And I was on, I was kind of like a check airman or whatever. I would be like a grader for engineering stuff. So I would be on station, and I would be grading people and watching what they're doing. And we drilled all the time. And
were other ships doing the same?
They would be drilling. I think we were probably drilling more because he had, firsthand knowledge from somebody who had been on a ship, as well as having the XO who had firsthand knowledge from all what they learned from mines going off and survivability. And again, because, computers, think about it. You take your computer and you just bang it against the wall. The circuitry is not going to work. But if you put it on shock mounts, well, then the energy can be absorbed and the things survive. So we trained all the time. And I think the one that was complained about the most was when we went to general quarters for training, in the middle of the night, like 1 a.m.
Yeah.
Oh, everybody was so mad because sleep is such a critical thing. It's like being on the wide body. Your rest break. I mean, you either sleep or you either use it or lose it. And if you lose it, you ain't sleeping for another 8 hours. So you better.
Right.
So that just, the people who were sleeping, they were not happy. But and we did it. And people complained. And
until it happened.
But until it happened. And that was why I felt in the middle of it, the training was so good that I felt like, because they would do all kind of simulate this and that, and they would try to make things as realistic as possible. And you really felt like you were in an exercise. Now,
train like you fight and fight like you train, right?
Right, exactly. And one of the things that we did that was not done at the time, which is now more standard protocol, was from the Grenada, or not Grenada, from the Falklands, when the Brits were down in Falklands and you had Exocet missiles hitting the British ships and stuff. Fire was a big deal, and damage, people in fire conditions and not having what we call flash gear, what's kind of like a sock that goes over your, fire retardant thing that you put on to help minimize burns. And we had those. We had those to wear, and then as a safety measure, so we didn't end up like Titanic, where if we hit a mine, a hole in the front of the ship, it would flood all the way aft before anybody could do anything. He said, we're main deck and below, we're going to go, it's called Zebra. So you close all the hatches. Ship, even though we're not doing anything, we're in the Persian Gulf, the ship is already divided into segments, so that if there is something that hits us, it's only going to flood that section. And if you had to go down the passageway, you had to go through each door, open, close, open, close, open, close. And we did it as, and if somebody didn't close it right, they'd get yelled at and say, no, you got to close it right. And that was not done. And again, had we have hit a contact mine, we would have been prepared to isolate the flooding, which was, that was very fortuitous that he thought about that. Now we ended up having, the flooding, most of it came from the pipes that burst and started flooding, and doing pipe repairs and stuff. And that's where the damage control training came from, being able to repair that type of flooding. But from that flooding, what the Navy learned was that chill water, these electronics are cooled by really super cold water.
Uh-huh.
That pipe broke, the compartment was flooding with super cold water. So you had guys in the Persian Gulf that were going into flooded compartments that was like the North Atlantic.
Mm.
So we weren't equipped for hypothermia. So we had to pull people out that were getting hypothermia.
Oh, wow.
Seemed weird, like, but that, that was something nowadays they take into account, that to be ready for that. Fighting a chill water fight, guys are going to have to get swapped out because they're going to start getting hypothermia.
What about the engine and the propeller shafts and stuff?
Well, the port propeller shaft they started hearing noises out of one of the bearings and stuff, because it went off underneath it, and so they shut that one down, and so we had the starboard one. But the engines are all shock mount. These are DC-10 turbine engines, LM2500 gas turbines, and they are all shock mounted and worked great.
God, that's amazing to me. I mean, thinking about that shock and the damage.
Oh yeah,
everything would still work.
And so that, so we definitely had that, but it all comes back to the training. And it was funny because when we were at the reunion with all the people, the first reunion, and I was talking with Captain Hontz, and he goes, "Man, back in the day, man, they hated me. And now it's like they love me." And I said, "Sir, of course they do, because it was your forward thinking and all the training. That is why there were only 3 people that were hurt. And I mean, there were actually more people that were hurt, but they weren't hurt enough to be evacuated."
Yeah.
Which kind of plays into an interesting thing with the Navy, being the Navy, is to get a Purple Heart, you have to be seen by a medical officer. So we had guys on our ship that would have, by the letter of Purple Heart, qualified for a Purple Heart. But they said, "I don't need, I'm fine. I just give me some stitches. I'll be fine, whatever. I'm not going to worry about it." And so they stayed on board. They stayed at because as anyone would in the Marines or whatever, you want to be with your buddies. You don't want to leave.
Yeah.
And so you just suck it up. You take your stitches or whatever and go back to work. And so there were several people that would have qualified, but they didn't get seen because on a cruiser you only have a corpsman, which is an E7.
Yeah.
And if you're on a carrier, you have an officer. But
that's stupid.
Don't. It wasn't until later that the captain realized that. But the way the rule was written, you had to be seen by an officer. So only 3 people got Purple Hearts because they were seen by a medical officer. But some of the people on the ship that I think by the letter of Purple Heart would have counted did not get seen by a medical officer. Therefore, it didn't count. Which, you
guys got cars then.
Yeah.
Combat action ribbon.
Combat action ribbon. And that was funny because we got cars. And the Tripoli got cars. And then there was one frigate that had kind of a stray missile or something that I think it was the sides or something, but it had a missile that blew up in the middle of the night. Something blew up next to them and did a little bit of damage. They got one. So we were the only 3. And again, in Navy fashion, they wanted to give out a little more chest candy. So they rewrote the combat action ribbon and added a combat area. That if there's a section of the combat action ribbon where you can put areas or different things, specifications. So they specified anybody who was north of a latitude got one, whether anything happened to them or not, just because north of a latitude. Which, I'm on base and you see somebody with a combat action ribbon, which was kind of a rare thing for the Navy at the time. And you're like, "Man, you're not on Princeton because, you know everybody on your ship. So you must have been on Tripoli, right?" And they're like, "Oh, no, I was on the whatever." And you're like,
"You guys did get it?"
Like, "No. Did y'all do it?" "No, they rewrote the rule. And as long as we were north of whatever, then we all got it." And I'm like, well, that dilutes it down.
Yeah, no kidding. But for those people who don't know, combat action ribbon for Marines or Navy means you were getting shot at, you shot at them,
Right.
something happened. Yeah.
Exactly. And so you kind of like, oh, okay, it is what it is.
Oh, that's so funny, man. Well, this one picture of you
Yeah.
with the video camera, that's in the dry dock, right?
So that is in the dry dock. My side gig the whole time I was there was the morale, welfare, and recreations officer, and it was the job that no JO wants. And I got it, and I said, you know what? I'm going to just do the best job I can. So I work really hard doing parties and movies and stuff, and I got a camera. I think it was for my birthday from my dad. Um, so I got this camera, and I was at the time that was pretty rare for people to have cameras. And on top of that, I had that device that the camera's on, and people know from movie making the Steadicam. Well, that was like a generation one steady. The guy that invented Steadicam, he invented one to be used for portable cameras, and so that was it. So you have a screen, and so I could walk around and have a balanced shot as I'm moving around filming stuff. So I would film all the time, and so I have hours of video, and on our YouTube page, I as I got closer to retirement, I started to post them because by that point everybody's retired. You know, you've kind of you've gotten out of the window of punitive damage, and
Uh-huh.
and
Statute
so
of limitations.
yeah, the statute of limitations had run out. However, there was one video that I had to wait until I was retired, and I was like, I'm not posting this until I'm retired, and that was the crossing the line ceremony because everybody knew I had it and they were begging, and I went, I'm not posting that until I'm retired. So
Well, I tell you what, I'll make sure the link is in the description so people can go back and check out some of the damage because you do a great job of walking through the ship later
yeah,
and you see the damage and the cracks going up the wall and doors blown off, the whole 9 yards. Hey, I tell you what, I've kept you for an hour and 25 minutes, my friend. And I think this has been by far the coolest thing because I've never met anybody until we flew together and you started telling me those stories. And I think about the way that you do stuff in the Navy translates so much to what we do in the air.
hmm
Train like you fight, fight like you train, baby. So we go out there and we have an engine out, step on the right rudder, get that correction in, go through the checklist. It's just everything translates really well. And hats off to your captain, who is an absolute stud, because I loved when he picked up the 1MC and goes, okay, before I was so rudely interrupted.
exactly. That came up like yeah, he that was hilarious when he did that. When he did that,
So
and
you had a great man. When you see him,
yeah,
please tell him that he
yep.
doesn't know me from Adam, but I think the world of him as an officer.
He
And
is out. He is out. He lives out in California, and he will be. I have no doubt he will be there at our next reunion, which will be whenever the ship is commissioned. It's kind of a somber time, but we are
yeah,
looking to have an incredible party with all the crew and just celebrate the history of the ship because it's amazing. The ship has a longer Navy career than anybody that was a plank owner. And
yeah,
nor that's not the case. Normally, the cruisers, get damaged and stuff, or just over time, just repairs, just need to be swapped out. And so there are a lot of cruisers that have been retired, but since Princeton's radar, which was so good, is still so good, they did a lot of upgrades and stuff that kept her in the game and in the fight. In fact, I think she's going to probably do one more deployment before her retirement.
So was the Shiloh, USS Shiloh, is that
Shiloh's
the same?
cruiser. Shiloh's an Aegis cruiser.
That's the same type.
Yeah. Now Shiloh was that one was if I remember right that one was based in Hawaii and that was
Yeah.
a test platform and Shiloh was the Aegis cruiser that again was a Spy 1B that shot the missile that took out the satellite. So when
We
the
buzzed we buzzed those guys out in Hawaii.
yeah oh for to test their radar and stuff and have them do training or you just
Oh, well, no, we were flying in. I don't know if I got a picture of it. we were flying in a F4D. Yeah, we're
Oh, wow.
flying in an F4D, and you see the big missile on the bottom.
Right.
That is a civilian F4. It was owned by Tricor Company out of Mojave
Right.
Desert, and we gave them gas on Tuesday, and then on Thursday. On Thursday, I got a ride in the back seat of that blue one, and I put my Lance Corporal in the back seat of the white one. Went up, gassed off a Herc, went up to 53,000 feet, launched the missile. The missile went to 80,000, and then came down onto the Shiloh,
Yeah.
and they shot up missiles to defeat it or whatever. And there was a Learjet flying around getting telemetry. Well, when we got done, we gassed off the Herc again, and then the ship asked if we would do a flyby. So we went down there and buzzed the ship, flew right across the nose of the ship, popped up to about 2,500 feet, and then came back up the stern and down each side. And then when we hit midship, we went vertical and rolled up to 35,000. And I made contact with the ship, and I posted the video and of us buzzing the ship. And I was hoping somebody on there would be like you back in the day, and had a camera and had videoed our flyby.
I bet. Now, what year was this?
91.
91.
No, December of 92.
92. Yeah. Because we had one of our crew, one of the ETs, Petty Officer Tharp, who ended up becoming an officer, and he went over to Shiloh. And I don't know if he was on Shiloh at that point or not, but we had some Princeton, because after the mine hit and the Desert Storm and stuff, then people started going, their rotation. In fact, we had guys that rotated right in the middle while we were in Dubai. They had the navigator left, and you hit your rotation point, you rotate. There were some people that were due to rotate right before we left for deployment, and because our deployment was totally going to be a love boat cruise, we had people extend enlistments to deploy, which is absolutely insane. Because
that's unheard of.
But if you're getting out, you want out. You don't want to be sitting in the ocean for 6 months. But we were going to Hawaii, then we were going to Japan, then we were going to be the first Americans into the Soviet Union, into Vladivostok, first Americans in 56 years. Then we were going to the Philippines and Thailand and Australia. And I was scared about Australia, because I went, if I go to Australia, there's going to be blonde-haired women, blue-eyed, and accent, and I'm going to come home married. I know. And so and that was it. And then you'd come back. You weren't even going to go to the Persian Gulf. So people extended just to go to Australia. And then we made it as far as the Soviet Union. And then they said, yeah, y'all are coming back, and then refitting and deploying, and you're going to the Gulf. And we're like, and the guys that extended were like,
yeah.
But yeah, it happens. But yeah, it is what it is. We had a good time.
Well, hey, buddy, hats off to you. Hats off to all the crew members on that ship. You guys did a valiant job of
absolutely
great job of saving that ship.
Our motto is nobody does it better, and that is it. Every bit is true. I mean, the lieutenants that trained me, I don't know, back in the day, it was tough. They were, sometimes they'd be a little hard on you, but it all worked out. We learned, we got smarter, and when the chips were down, and train as you fight as you train.
Yeah, you all did an outstanding job. Well, listen, brother, I appreciate you coming on talking about the Princeton. It's been a long time coming, a couple years. I've been wanting to talk to you.
So, well, we just had the February 18th was the 35th anniversary, so we are just time.
Yeah, perfect. And you know what? I have to bring you back on another time to talk about your business, flying icons. And selling a really cool airplane.
I'm still waiting for you to come fly.
So maybe that's what we need to do. I get to come out and get a little flight time so I can take some I Love Me shots and then post them up, and we can do a little advertising, a little talk about Icon.
We can definitely do that. You need to come out.
I will. We'll make a date. All right, brother. Listen, you have a great night, and hang on for a second, and I'll shut the show down. Hold on a second.
Okay.
Thanks again.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Hoorah. Guys, thanks again for joining us tonight. The USS Princeton 35th anniversary. To all the sailors, officers, enlisted who watched this video, I just want to say, well done, gentlemen. All of you, well done. Probably very, very few since World War II have had to go through what you have done. So if I ever see you, I'll buy you a beer because you've done great service. Take care until I see you guys again. Adios, hasta luego, sa wiedersehen, tschüss, sheshine, au revoir. Domarigato gozaimasu, tano shinde, kudasai, ciao, rivedici, tashikur, assalamu alaikum, mahala, novijenya, das vidanya. And I think I am going to end with this one right here. See you guys.